Blue light. Oh, yeah. Okay. That means it's on. Okay. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here with you. I know most of you now. That's nice. I'm Melissa, for those that I don't know. Anybody here for the first time? Okay, welcome. We sit together for the first part and meditation, and then we'll have a talk and questions in the last hour. So that's what we'll be doing. And let's start with the meditation. So set your posture up so you're comfortable. Try to be a bit informal in your practice, more natural feeling. You're just sitting. And allow yourself to relax. And take your attention in and notice if there's any places of gripping or holding around your forehead. Your eyes. The heart center, you can relax. And just a reflection as we start today that meditation is a training, a practice of our attention and where we're placing it. All meditations are placing attention on a specific object with different purposes. We'll practice mindfulness, which is bringing attention to direct experience in the present moment. It actually really doesn't matter which experience in the present moment, just any. But in order to stabilize and settle the mind, we come back to what is called a primary object. And we'll use the breath as the primary object today. So letting chest and belly be relaxed, allow your breath to come in and out on its own naturally. Not too tight, not too loose when breathing in. Know you're breathing in. When breathing out, know you're breathing out. And because our minds are scattered when we come into our practice from the busyness of our lives, it's good to use a word. In, out, rising, falling, breathing in, breathing out. When we sit down and we observe our mind, we are just observing its conditioned state, its habit. And all of us in here have a mind that's habitually scattered all over the place. And the Buddha described that 2,500 years ago too. This mind that's hard to alight where it wishes. It's hard to settle it. So you have moments of knowing you're on the breath and then the mind wanders. You gently bring it back. Patiently, softly, persistently. Then it can wander again and again and again. Doesn't matter. Try to establish an attitude of patience and kindness towards yourself. This mindfulness practice of always meeting what is as it is. There's nothing to fix, change, control, manipulate. Just be aware. So we bring the awareness inwards, we might begin to notice other experiences. bodily experiences, heat or coolness or tension, movement, hardness, softness in the body. If anything pulls your attention, you can notice it, acknowledge it. And then come back to the breath. The mind wanders into thought, and we come back, wanders into thought, and we come back. Just be willing to come back, that's all you need. None of us need the mind to not wander. And how nice, how relaxing, that all you have to do is know, am I breathing in or am I breathing out? You start to sense there's a mind state present, a feeling, an emotion. Then name your feeling and see where you can feel it in your body. Don't try to change it, don't try to manipulate it, create space for it. This is reality right now. And let yourself feel what you feel. Without going into interpretation or story. Just emotion. And come back to the breath again. Become aware of our senses and direct experience of our senses concurrent with the happening of the senses. In this room we have sounds. If they take your attention, they're not in the way. Just be aware that you're hearing. All awareness is equal. What we're aware of doesn't matter. Your mind isn't more wandery than other people's minds. It's just how we all are. Take heart in each moment that you're just here. One moment at a time. When difficulties present themselves in our practice, they are there to be healed. We heal them with a loving awareness, with understanding. They are the path. Okay, does anybody first have a question about the meditation practice at all? Any difficulty you want to? Okay. I read a really interesting story the other day on NPR, and apparently there are, over the summer there were these, did you read this story? Bowls, big 2,000-pound bowls that were mysteriously drained of their blood. Did you hear about this? Anybody read this? No? Okay. So it was really interesting. 5 bowls on a ranch in Oregon were found, and they had been mysteriously drained of their blood, and then their genitals and their ear was cut with a precision knife, it had to be a very serious scalpel to be able to do that. And it's an open case, and the local authorities just have no clue. And around the bowls, there's no evidence of anything having happened. There's not a drop of blood. There's no puncture wounds. There's no scientific explanation for what is going on with these bulls. And apparently it's a phenomena. It's happened at other ranches before. And I was very proud of NPR for posting that story. But a week later, they posted another story about the reaction that they got from people and the criticism they got for sharing that story, which I find really fascinating. They mentioned in the story that people speculate that maybe it's aliens that are doing this. They didn't say that themselves. They just mentioned that that's one of the theories. And so there was just all this criticism for it. And they were surprised themselves because they simply stated something that happened. It happened. And it's an interesting side of delusion that we all have that doesn't want to take in new information. There's a strong propelling of our individual beliefs and views. We're really strongly conditioned. If we believe something, even as new evidence can appear, and the mind can resist that. It can deny it, and it can push it away. It doesn't want to see it. And we don't have to come up with a conclusion about it, right? Because that would be the other side of things. I have this desire to believe that it's aliens. So that I want it to be aliens. How cool would that be? It would be so uninteresting if they figure out it's just some pranksters or something. But a mind that wants that too can block out information too. And, because I want it, it's this agenda of mine. How much cooler will that be? But with mindfulness, that is what we're practicing in bare attention and awareness when we meet present moment experience with and what we're doing. I can't say without our preconceived ideas of things. What we're doing is then exposing what our preconceived ideas are in the practice of it. And then seeing the difference. This is experience. This is the don't know, aware mind that listens. And this is the conditioned mind that assumes, that judges, that fabricates, that has its own personal interpretation, that we have long taken to be very real. And then we get humble in seeing how it's not as real as we thought it was. The other night, my boyfriend didn't come home from work, and he always does. I'm usually asleep when he comes home because he works late. And I woke up, and he wasn't there, and I called him, and his phone was off. So, I don't know how you guys are, but my mind didn't go to, I'm sure everything's great and fine. It's not the first thing. I went very suspicious places, what's happening. And then I had emotion from what I believed to be happening. There was an emotional charge, and then he came home soon after, and it was very innocent and had to do with his, I don't know, whatever. The phone wasn't working, and And he went by and saw a friend, couldn't call me, right? It was really, really innocent. But I had a momentum of these emotions, and they wanted to still be right in some way, but they just weren't. It was very innocent what happened, But, because I have this practice and I'm able to okay, this is mine. I own these emotions. I don't have to, and I know how to work with them. They pass, and then I can see the situation for it, what it is, and the person in front of me for what they are. The mind that gets suspicious can project monsters, can project enemies in a way. I've been thinking a lot about giving the gift of practice. I received the gift of practice, and now I give it to other people, the gift of the Dharma. And the interesting thing about giving the gift of the Dharma, unlike giving a sweater, when you give a sweater, it's complete, right? You just put it on. There's nothing to do. You get the benefit of the gift. And it's not the same with giving the gift of the Dharma. Once you give the gift of the Dharma, whoever is the recipient of the gift then has to do something with it. So if you just hear it, we just hear about these practices, it's not enough. You won't get the benefit of the gift. The sweater won't keep you warm there. You got to take the tools of the practice and do something with it. And in the Buddhist suttas, this is so emphasized. And there's so many beautiful, really practical instructions for people to work with inside their lives that will receive the benefit if we take these practices. But I emphasize that mostly because it's a way that you can be kinder to yourself. Realize it just takes practice. All I do more is more consistent effort in my practice. That's it. I'm more willing to just do the work of practice. I'm more surrendered to the fact that the mind goes negative so very frequently for everybody. And I haven't met anybody that's not true for. So this tendency of the mind to go that way is what the Buddha was telling us is the truth for us, untrained worldlings. When the mind isn't trained, as soon as it's not directly, intentionally placed, then it has a tendency to go towards negative places. My sister sent me a link of somebody the other day. She's not much of and no interest in meditation practice. You have those family members, right? We all have those family members. And there's nothing. She has wonderful qualities, and I love her, and we're very close. But she sent me this thing of a woman that was talking about the mind and the negative tendency of the mind, and she was giving a particular story of being at a yoga class, didn't realize she was arriving early, and that her mind then suddenly was like, okay, we'll just leave then. And she was calling that a negative experience of the mind, which, yeah, I can see that it is. But the Buddha was more specific about really classifying the things in the mind that lead to harm and the things in the mind that lead to benefit. And then nurturing, growing, practicing, orienting, repeating in the mind towards the things that lead to benefit. They called them kusala, mind states, wholesome, as we translate skillful. And so part of the system of practice that's laid out, there's just so much in it that you can work with every day. And if it's not showing up naturally for you that you feel compassionate to others, it just doesn't. It's okay, If it's not showing up naturally that you feel confident, if it's not showing up naturally that you want to practice, if it's not showing up naturally that you're feeling patient with humanity, then that's okay, because we can practice that. And so that's really what I loved about the Theravada tradition and practice. It was very clear instructions, and as soon as I applied them, almost in a mechanical way, it's like, okay, I can do that. I'm like, oh, wow, that's producing an effect. It's producing a benefit in my life by working and practicing. So the Buddha said, in as much as we orient and practice and put energy. One of my first teachers was Sayadaw Pandita from Burma, and he emphasized effort. He emphasized effort. It takes doing something. He would call it courageous effort. And consistency is good. Daily is good, like anything and any habit that we want to make. And I don't say that to make you feel like, oh God, another thing to do. But to have some kindness toward yourself. If you are finding that you're irritated or you're impatient, or just know that's just how the mind is, or orienting towards selfishness or judging others or whatever, all that, or worrying, or anybody do any of these things? Yes. So then we can look like, okay, we're always practicing something. And that's the check-in of mindfulness. What am I practicing right now? Mentally, verbally, and in action. What am I practicing? Because all we are is conditioned habits, and those conditioned habits are changeable. They aren't of a self, and when we orient them back to the image of you, your name, and your head, and why am I like that? You're not. You're not. It's just a habit. It's a habit we pick up from. It's pretty universal. We're all pretty much the same. But the Buddha gave different practices. We practice mindfulness. We can practice some of the 10 paramis, which are kind of virtues, but also just wholesome mind states, and that wholesomeness meaning that these things practice uplift and lead to benefit, lead to a better world, lead to a better inner experience, create good karma too. So you do experience the good benefits of practicing. Some of the paramis are generosity. And that's one for me that if I'm not intentional about, I'll forget to be of service to others. And in a lot of ways, my mind is just busy taking care of me, the people around me, and I'll forget. There are very beautifully clear instructions in Buddhist practice of giving very freely. That wonderful practice. You take your friend to lunch and they're like, I'll get you next time, right? Kind of takes away from the intention of generosity. It's like, that's even. We may as well both just pay for our own lunch right now. Or is that expectation when we're giving something, we actually want something back? So that takes a kind of practice, because that can be in there so easily for us. It takes an orienting of the mind of free, orienting of the mind, that person, the benefit for them. That takes practice. And it's so fun once you start get going. It's a great source of joy, great source of happiness. It brings a lot of happiness. We practice non-harming. We practice renunciation as one of the paramis, which was never my favorite one, but as we reflect, but it is now. In the beginning of my practice it wasn't, but nekkhamma is the Pali word for it. But if we reflect on what's happening in the world, we are going to be required to renounce a lot if we don't do it automatically, because we are eating up the world now through greed. Just eating more. That's what the mind wants, more. And we're going to be required to not feed that so much. And actually it turns out, that sounds like it's a bummer, right? It's not Christmas anymore. But but it isn't. One of my teachers, Michelle McDonald, described a monastery in Burma, in an area that I've been to, but I hadn't been to this particular monastery. A quiet monastery where there's not a big flock of followers, even Burmese followers, let alone Western followers there. But a quiet and deep monk, and she said walking on to this monastery gave a real feeling of richness, an exquisite kind of feeling. But it was in a very poor village and not a lot of support. And she said there would be like a bowl on the shelf with a crack in it that we would have thrown away 50 years ago. But they used the thing, value and used the thing till the end, and then kind of counterintuitively, almost, that's what gave the feeling of like luxury almost and beauty. That things were placed very mindfully. That she tries to give this monk gifts sometimes. They had the boards of the walls where the little monks, they have little monks in Burma, where they were, and they were all broken. She wanted to donate, and no, if it still can be used, then he wouldn't do that. That really inspired me in ways where I see we have it. So we can go to H&M. We can replace things so much, and I've learned now to turn back in on these things that we have, because that is, using up the world's resources is what's creating all of the what's going to be traumatic pretty soon. So that quality of renunciation actually then gives a joyful feeling. So it does the opposite of what we think it might, That going against always brings more happiness than feeding the mind that just is like, oh, I want. And it's hard. I mean, there's just not a society in the human history that has all of what we're fed all the time, through ads and our phones and all of that. We're really fed like that more. So it makes sense that it's speeded up the greed in our society. But it's good too, because it will start to wake us up. The pain of it. We get to really experience the pain of it, as the Buddha did. Like I said, he had a luxurious life. I would so much rather have my life than his life. 2,500 years ago, for sure. There was no Spotify. If you wanted to listen to music, it had to be a musician that could play in front of you. Couldn't listen to rap and to classical and to whatever. No. So we really he gave up a decadent life, seeing that it didn't satisfy. We have way more than he does, or did at that time. Energy, we practice that, putting forth, countering laziness. So much of where I am in my practice is because of laziness. I could be somewhere else. I give in to that energy. I know I have good virya too sometimes, but laziness is something that's in all of us. We don't want to do it. And so just identifying that when it's there, we act on it, we don't really know we're acting on it sometimes, and then learning how to practice energy. And we do all of this. Like you practice renunciation when you're lying in bed, the alarm goes off, you got to go to work, and you want to stay in bed, but you go to work. That's a moment of renunciation. You renounced the pleasure of staying in bed all morning for the better part of actually taking care of your life. So we do practice these things. We have all of them. It's not like they're out there. We have all of them, and we have the seeds to everything. And through putting our attention on the wholesome qualities, they begin to grow in us. The Buddha gave this advice. I share this sutta a lot, so I'm sure I have in here before. Even to his own son. And his own son in the Rahula Sutta, he told his son, before thinking, acting, or speaking, reflect. Well, the first thing he said is, what is a mirror for? And his son said, for reflection. And he said, so in the same way, before you speak, act, or think, reflect. Is what I'm doing going to harm somebody else, or is it going to harm myself? Will it lead to affliction of myself or somebody else? Just reflect. And if it does, then it's not fit for you to do. And if it doesn't, then continue to do it. But I think that's another teaching of, like for his son, you have to take the reflection. We have to take the practice. We have to kind of pause. Having that intention in a conversation in really subtle ways, you can see. Maybe when you're trying to prove yourself right even. You're trying to prove somebody else wrong. There's a subtle, I want to harm this person here. So reflecting, am I harming? Am I causing harm here? and then not doing it, and that it takes practice. And he said, while you're doing it, because maybe sometimes you're in mid harming somebody, but while you're doing that, reflect, and if you are, then stop what you're doing. Reflect, does this lead to the affliction of somebody else, the affliction of myself? And if it does, then stop what you're doing. And if it doesn't, continue. And then afterwards, reflect. So I like it because it's structure, right? We need reminders, we need structure, and we need practice. Not for anybody, not the Buddha, not his son, not for anybody. Are they just naturally in that state? That all of these things are part of our practice, are our practice. And so in as much as we do it, they will grow. And in as much as we don't, unfortunately, they start to diminish. Compassion diminishes if we don't practice it. Patience diminishes if we don't practice it. I don't know why I brought this. I don't have a good segue here. But this is one of my favorite suttas. Is called the simile of the saw. And the interesting part about the beginning of the sutta, there's kind of two pieces of it, and I don't quite get why they're in the same sutta. But the first part of it was a story of a woman who had a good reputation, and everybody thought she was really patient and kind and loving in her village or whatever. And she had they actually said slave in the text, and a servant or whatever, but the servant was thinking, she's really nice and generous because I take care of everything for her. She's got it pretty easy. And so the servant started to test her, and she didn't wake up in time one morning. And the woman became very annoyed and angry. And then she did it a second time. She shouted, and the third time she hit her over the head and shed blood. And then the woman's reputation was ruined. Nobody thought she was kind anymore. But this is relative to all of us, because it is really easy when things are easy in our lives. To be happy, to be patient. And it really is these times when we're challenged that we can be glad for the difficulty that comes, the anger that comes, the impatience that comes to the surface. If we're feeling that anger, that is our work to work on in our practice. Don't expect that it's not there if things were comfortable for a long time, or maybe not. Difficulties draw up the afflictive mind states in humans, and that's when we can work on them. So they're good. In the second part of the sutta, the Buddha was giving this advice to his monks about the way people speak to you, and he said, monks, there are these 5 aspects of speech by which others may address you: timely or untimely, true or false, affectionate or harsh, beneficial or unbeneficial, with a mind of goodwill or with a mind of inner hate. Others may address you in a timely or untimely way. They may address you with what is true or what is false. They may address you in an affectionate way or a harsh way. They may address you in a beneficial way or an unbeneficial way. They may address you with a mind of goodwill or with inner hate. In any event, you should train yourself. So he's telling him you got to practice. Have you guys had this kind of speech come at you before? Harsh speech come at you sometimes. So he's telling us, okay, that we need to practice then. There's something we need to practice. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall say no evil words. We will remain sympathetic to the person's welfare with no inner hate. We will keep pervading him with an awareness imbued with goodwill. And beginning with him, we will keep pervading the all-encompassing world with an awareness imbued with goodwill, abundant, expansive, immeasurable, free from hostility, free from ill will. That's how you should train yourself. Is that what you do? We don't do that. We don't do that because we need the effort to do that. We need the practice to do that. But there is something beautiful. I told somebody this story the other day. I was in a very good, light mood, and my cousin sent me a text. I sent her a text, and her response is, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And I had just pervaded her with thoughts of loving kindness. And I did. I was able to do it because I was in a really good mood. It happened easily for me that day. It doesn't always. I could have been offended on another day. And very soon a text came, "I'm sorry." Very soon. We don't have to sometimes. We don't have to. People see themselves. So then he gave this scenario. Tell me how you feel about this. Monks, even if bandits were to carve you up savagely limb by limb with a two-handled saw, he among you who let your heart get angered, even at that would not be doing my bidding. Even then you should train yourselves. Our minds will be unaffected. We will say no evil words. Will we remain sympathetic? Can you imagine that? If I was being sawed by somebody, it would be very difficult for me to do that. I know it doesn't. It doesn't kind of sound healthy to me. Yeah, I know. And then he says, monks, if you attend constantly to this, on the simile of the saw, do you see any aspects of speech, slight or gross, that you could not endure? So that's what he was. He was kind of giving the biggest example, and then bring that back into speech. Like, can we practice this? Now, what I'm going to say is give it a try, because people. One of the ways that the ego is most triggered is by being afraid of being a doormat. It's an egoic fear. But the Buddha didn't say this for the same reason that we might take Jesus saying turning the other cheek, though I think Jesus was saying the same thing. We might take it in this, like, what's the word? Doormat kind of way. But the real reason is that these acts of love and kindness are strong and forceful. They are what will win in this world if we can live by them. Hatred doesn't cease with hatred, but with love alone does it cease. That is the eternal law. It's a law. It's just a law that we can line ourselves up with. And as soon as we get entangled in hatred in ourselves, I have a friend who's a Dharma teacher even, who was posting on Facebook about his hatred of Russia the other day. Because Russia is intolerant, or some people in Russia, in his view, are intolerant of in that view, the LGBTQ rights. But the thing about it is that you cannot fix that hatred with hatred. You cannot. If you want to learn about that kind of ignorance and hatred, just see it in your reaction to it. That's the same. It's equal. This one isn't right because they're wrong. It's just not. The belief in a self-righteous hatred is what perpetuates wars again and again and again and again. So we need to find a different means, one that's effective, one that's skillful. How do we fight hatred? Skillfully, with a mind wide opened, with a heart wide open. And we do that by really understanding how hatred arises in ourselves. Anybody that has made their mind free of hatred will not hate somebody that hates, right? Because they understand it. They know it. When you know it so well, the mind starts to get free itself of hatred. Compassion and understanding. So much blame going on, though, of the very thing that we are filled with, right? We project it out. It's all them out there, them and all their greed and their ignorance and their hatred. But we have to watch our means if we want effectiveness, if we don't want war to just continue, hostility to just continue. The means are laid out so beautifully. So hard to do. sometimes to overcome my mind that wants to, whatever. It takes practice. It takes practice. Okay, so I'll stop talking and then you guys we'll open up for discussion or questions. This is dead, totally.
I totally hear you that hatred cannot cure hatred, and it also just makes me question, what does one do with the anger that arises from a Buddhist viewpoint?
Yeah. It's not me that you're hearing. It was what the Buddha said, that hatred doesn't like. Well, it does arise, and it arises in me. It did the other day when in that story that I was telling, and so then I practice it with it. When I acted on it and I did that day, then I regret it, and so it leads to remorse, and you're not blameless then in those moments. You're not blameless. You just contributed to harm. So then it complicates things. You can't heal the thing. I've been amazed at when, like with my story about my cousin, when I've not responded, how healing that always ends. It works every single time. It works every single time. But the mind has a tendency to go out and then look and try to fix externally. And the training of taking the mind back inwards is really what we all need. Like, you take care of yourself, these emotions and feelings, and that's not to say that it's easy, but to understand that it's practice, and that it doesn't matter if it arises naturally. It doesn't matter. It's something that we can, like he was saying, train ourselves, practice. And we just have to have intention. Like right now, I have to have intention. Like I don't want, and I have to think about it. I have to reflect. Like I don't want to just go to a suspicious place. So next time something happens I don't know, how can I have to set up structure. Otherwise my mind will just do that again, And that's true for all of us. We give structure. So that's what I love about all of these practices. And we meet in a group and we read books, and all of that starts to give us some kind of structure and a new habit. And then every time I'm so deeply rewarded by when I practice. And you don't always see the results of your practice right away. They don't always show up immediately. But you keep doing it. And it's like, oh, that was so worth it. It was so worth that effort. Greed, hatred, and delusion, anger is one of the three roots that it's with us so much. I went on a retreat one time and I'm like, all I am is angry. That's it, all day long. I'm annoyed and angry, walking around, irritated and judgmental and annoyed and angry. When you look carefully at the mind, as soon as it's going off, it can really go into those kinds of places. And so not to self that, not to make it our personal problem. I'm lucky that I get to hear people talk about what's in their minds, and I've never been surprised. We're all the same. So.
To your knowledge, is there any consideration given to the greater good? In other words, aren't there some harms that may need to happen in order to create a greater good? If I'm being sawed, if I do nothing, it's going to help them go down the road and saw somebody else.
You didn't say do nothing, you just said keep sending them loving kindness.
But what do you make of that? Is there a greater good? Did he acknowledge that a greater good ever to be achieved if smaller harms or
No, but he didn't acknowledge that, but I can see why he wouldn't acknowledge that, because that could so easily be taken by deluded minds, and a lot of harm be tried to be justified through that. That being said, Deepa Ma would say, or did say, I don't know, she was talking about if somebody was robbing you. She said, with all the loving kindness in your heart, hit him over the head with your umbrella. Yeah.
Rick, I can only say that every time I've ever heard for the greater good is bad. It turns out bad. I don't know why. I think because it like goes towards some dogma that they can manipulate whoever's saying it towards their ends, their intention. I don't know. That's just what comes to mind. But what I wanted to say was, I've always liked this saying. Robert Frost said, "Hate is love lost in its own darkness." And part of that, I think, is because if you didn't love whatever you hate, or an aspect of it, you wouldn't care.
Yeah, I've heard that said before too. Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Sydney.
I had an interesting, similar example last night. My husband comes home angry. He's like, yelling and screaming because we parked tandem in a condo, and so apparently my car wasn't pulled forward enough. So he's coming in yelling like, "You didn't pull your car far enough," blah blah blah. And I mean, he was full of it, right? And I was in a good mood, thank God, because otherwise I could have reacted right back.
Yeah.
Started, telling him how petty that is, blah blah blah. But I took a moment and I just saw that his suffering in that moment, and thank you to my practice, I'm going to say. I said, "Did you have a bad day, baby?" And that just diffused the whole energy.
Yeah.
And I wish I could do that all the time.
I know, me too.
So the whole talk reminds me of I was at a retreat last year with Gil Fronsdale, and the topic was wise effort, and he summarized the whole thing into saying, "Don't make it worse." So the whole, the four sections of the wise effort, he said, if it's not cultivate the mind that won't want to make it worse, and if it's already making it worse, stop it. And cultivate the mind to want to make it better, and if it's already getting better, keep doing.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and that I think when we have those glimpses of seeing a situation healed from the right mind, from practicing and cultivating the right mind, seeing how love diffuses hate, that is what will make it grow, because we grow in the faith of it. We grow in the confidence of it. We're not afraid anymore. If I don't fight back, then I'm like a doormat or whatever. We're not afraid anymore. We see the power of it. It's how difficult it is, but how very, very, very powerful it is. And then again, so then next time with your husband, you can have that intention, because maybe you're not in a good mood, right? And we won't always be in a good mood. It won't always come easily. It doesn't have to. But we can have that intention. This is going to be hard for me sometimes, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to practice it. And I've done that by I'm going to remove myself, sit on the toilet in the bathroom. Just like, okay, and apply these tools. Let the energy calm. And yeah, and then the faith grows more and more and more, and that's wisdom. Can you imagine if everybody was trying that right now? How different the world would be? Well, that's okay. We'll be the examples. And examples is the most important thing. My teacher doesn't say hardly anything, but he's just an example of a kind and loving, he lives it. His energy is it. And we all pick up on that, so we can be that. Can't teach others anyway. Nobody wants to be taught.
Thank you for your teachings. One of the things I wanted to say was so for me, what I notice is like there's so much of this medicine in realizing, like when you're caught in that space of you notice what you're doing and that you're causing harm to yourself or to others. And so one of the things that happens for me is that, when you get really practiced at and used to recognizing sort of where you're falling short or where you're aware of something that you're doing that's harmful, is this desire, at least for myself, to reward myself for having noticed it, and then it's almost like a permission slip to stop trying. Like this, oh well, it's like to check off that box, like, oh well, you noticed, so that's good. But then going forward, when it arises again, is this laziness to continue to make the effort, because it's like, well, I've done that. Yeah. So many times, and like, whatever,
Yeah.
but it's so human, right?
Yeah.
And so just trying then to find this compassion for the fact that I'm lazy, essentially. But
Exactly.
it really spoke to me when you were mentioning that it really does take this practice, because at least for me, I struggle all the time with, compassion versus like not wanting to be accountable, almost like just this. Because you've done it a couple times or many times, and because it's a practice, and you're never done, right? It's like you're never finished. You can't ever go like, well, I did that, and I don't ever have to do that again. It's like always.
You can actually, but it's really, really, really hard. It's really
so
hard. And
every
it's
day,
unusual.
all the time.
Yeah.
It's moment to moment practice, right?
Yeah.
But that, at least for me, and I'm sure for many people here, want to check the box so that you just don't have to,
Right.
And so thank you for the reminder that it is, still a constant practice.
I know, and we have that with so many different things. I have that with money. I just want it to be done. I don't want to have to think about it anymore, but I have to think about it still, right? I wish it was just done, but we don't have that with food, right? We know we're going to have to keep eating, and so it's the same with this nourishment of the mind. We got to keep doing it. But it is true that the mind can be totally self-realized. That and these beings are becoming more unusual. At the time of the Buddha, apparently there were lots of them, but and I haven't met one at all. But it is possible that the mind is becomes so aware, and this is what we're training for, that the afflictive mind states no longer arise. That suffering, the mind is so aware of itself, so has seen through the afflictions for what they are, that they no longer appear in that person's consciousness. That is a possibility. But in the meantime, we got to keep practicing, and that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't bother me anymore that I have to practice. It just doesn't. I know it now. I have accepted it, that I have to apply this effort, or my mind very, very soon. Driving here from Big Bear, you just see the mind, just like, what do I have to worry about? What tragedy is going to happen? Like this imagine, like, but it doesn't bother me anymore that I go, okay, no, now I'm directing it, loving kindness, may I be safe, and you be safe. It doesn't bother me, but that's effort. That's effort as a parami, is something that is conditioned. it's a habit, right? Like anytime, have you gotten in good habit with something, whether your work or and you just see that the effort is no longer so effortful. So it's the same with our practice, habit. Chica.
Thank you so much for the talk. And my question is, yes, I'm practicing my own mindfulness. But if I'm living with somebody, they're going to reacting in some ways.
Yeah.
And I started notice, okay, sometimes like when I'm mindful, I'm very one person oriented view. But if I live with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
I have to be mindful of other person's emotions in some ways because they affect me too.
Yeah.
So how should I do that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, bringing mindfulness back into your reactions to their emotions is the way to practice mindfulness with other people, because the mind then goes outwards again, fixing them. But if there's a really great sutta that I talk about a lot called the simile of the acrobat, and the Buddha it's so about interpersonal relationships, and it's a sutta that you can't just hear and then that's it. Now you're going to understand it. It's like it takes a kind of working, and I've taught this for probably a decade now. I've done a lot of focus on this particular sutta, and I still have to call on it. But he talks about protecting others by protecting yourself, and protecting yourself by protecting others. But anyways, through the practice of mindfulness. But then he gives the very clear instructions of what mindfulness is also knowing from what place you're acting. And he gave towards others. So our job is to be patient, not harm them, to be understanding, and to care for them. And those 4 words, they just come to me when I'm in an interpersonal kind of thing. My work here is patience, if they're having an afflictive patience, and not harming, because there is a little kind of harm when we want to stop somebody from acting in certain ways. And just orienting the mind towards saying those words, it's amazing what that can do. That's the practice of it. Caring for and understanding. Understanding, okay, I understand anger, right? When your husband's angry, okay, he's angry right now. He's angry, and we can be mindful of somebody else's anger in the same way we are when we're sitting. How do you handle your anger when you're sitting? You name it, you feel it in your body. You don't get in the story of it, right? So same, you don't want to get in the story of somebody else's anger, anger, they're angry. And when you do that to another person, it's really amazing because you've just acknowledged them at their reality without trying to manipulate or control, just like we do with our internal world. And that turns out to be really healing. But those words, patience, non-harming, understanding, and caring for. And when I'm with my people or anybody I'm around and I start to feel my afflictive energy, then I say those words, and it's just it changes. And we have to practice, because we'll get impatient. We'll want to harm. We'll lose our care for people close to us. It takes practice. Yeah. Is there another? Okay, one more, and then we'll close.
Thanks for the last question. That could be a whole Dharma talk for 3 hours at least. And then what arose was narcissism, because I feel like that adds a whole nother layer, because it's like how much do you just, I don't know, you might as well just get sawed in half and just send love and compassion. But I don't know the way through that.
There's somebody in your life that is suffering from narcissism? Is that what?
That's a nice way of saying it. I think they are, and I try and distance myself as much as possible. But it is the holidays, and when they're like, "How are you doing?" I don't really want to engage at all. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I don't know how much feelings I should share, or like the whole boundary setting. because the question that you just asked, it was not so much anger necessarily. It's more like, I'm talking about multiple people right now. Sorry. Like, it's more like sloth. Like, how do you kind of, like, you can't make them put the fire underneath their ass, but at the same time, do you do everything for them? Or like, there's a narcissist that asks, like, how are you doing? But they make it all about you. I don't know if that made any sense at all, but yeah.
Well, what I can say is that practice for me has really helped me to understand in my own mind so much what is afflictive that I'm able to recognize it on the outside world a lot more easily. So when I've seen my own mind, when I see it on the outside world, I recognize a view, or I recognize emotion or manipulation or anything, to the degree that if I see a person as not seeing the harm that they are causing, if they aren't seeing, it's easy for me to now walk away from that person, because if I don't, then I'm just going to keep being subjected to harm. And that came through understanding of my own, how harm is created on the inside of me, and that has been the greatest thing to help me create real boundaries, not just subject yourself to somebody that doesn't see clearly, that has a pattern of creating harm. And then, some harms we see, maybe we have partners, or maybe we have children, or we have parents, or whatever. You can see their harm, but you got to still kind of live with them. And there's a way that you just don't engage with it so much, don't get involved with it so much, and try to be a patient. Some of the harm, we all harm, so, to some degrees, everybody's got to practice patience with us too, right? Not you, no. Nobody has to practice patience with me. So, but anyways, it's not a question I can answer specifically, but I'm just saying the tools of practice do help you to wisely walk away from a toxic situation.
I'm good at walking away. It's when I have to be in the same space.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know there's no trick, because I think there's just so much going on, and meditating, and it's like I can have compassion to a certain degree, and sometimes like there's just certain people that just kind of take you out when you just want to build your.
Well, try that. Take this with you.
Okay.
And just try it, practice it, and come back and tell us how it worked. Okay, let's end with the sharing of merit. So reflecting on the rarity it is to do this kind of work, and the effort that you've already put in it's very big, and there's goodness that will come from that, and that goodness we want to dedicate and share. You can bring to mind somebody in your life that you'd specifically like to share your practice with. Maybe they need help, somebody hurting. May the goodness that has arisen from my practice, may it benefit this being. And then may the goodness that has arisen from my practice benefit all beings everywhere. Thank you, everybody.